Good afternoon, Frank.
Hi, Professor
Uh,
Spooner.
there's a lot to talk about this week. More trouble in several different parts of the world. Financial in China, which seems to be affecting all the stock markets,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously affects general stability,
Mm-hmm.
and the increased fighting in Yemen, and the this development of a new type of problem between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And then probably the most what shall I say, sensational thing today is the anniversary of Charlie Hebdo in Paris, and the way their periodical has marked it by an illustration on the front page with
Right.
which I haven't actually seen, but I heard on the BBC, shows a picture of God with blood on his face and a Kalashnikov in his hands, when the legend underneath said, "And he's still at large," which is very much in the style of Charlie Hebdo. And there were a lot of there were interviews on the BBC with people who survived the attack a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think all of these things actually play into the principles that we've been talking about on and off for months now, of the different parts of the world being at different stages on the trajectory towards merging into a global community, and that the biggest problems that arise today have to do with the unevenness between the process in different parts of the world. I'm particularly interested in the history of religion at the moment, for a book that I'm contributing to. And I think that one thing that one has to make sense of today is the rise of secularism, which is spreading. But at the same time that secularism is spreading, there is an increase in the number. Well, Christianity, I think, is the fastest growing religion in the world at the moment, but not the only religion that's growing. But the way that religion is growing is in small communities rather than increased adherence to the larger, what should we say, the standard forms of the established religions. I think that the way these arenas of social interaction are merging and creating larger and larger communities in which more and more people are interacting all the time and coming into contact with people that are new to them, that have different life experience from them, is creating a lot of problems of identity. And some people are reacting to that by seeking something to belong to that will give them an identity, and that's what these new small religious movements do, or new interpretations of established religions do. But then, of course, in some cases, what they're doing is rebelling against the continuing not only rise of secularism, spread of secularism, but perhaps in some cases intensification of a secularist approach to the modern world.
Well, one place that secularism is not rising is in Iran.
Well, I'm not sure that
Oh,
that's
really?
true. It's not in the government, but I think I may have said before that we get applications from at the University of Pennsylvania from students in Iranian universities saying they want to come and study anthropology at the University of Pennsylvania, and they tell us in their email that they're atheists.
Oh, well, that's about as secular as you can get.
No, there's a lot of people are losing interest in Islam in the middle classes. It's the government and the rural population that supports the government mainly, and that's what allowed the religious class to hijack the revolution in 70s, because the revolution started off as a secular and secular movement with communist roots.
Well, and even today, I believe the religious apparatus, the muscle behind it, are those local rural toughs. I forget what the Persian name is for them, but they're almost like the brown shirts of the Nazi era.
It's the Revolutionary Guards, but
yeah, but there's another name for. There's a class underneath them that are much more loosely affiliated. But I'm just wondering how. Because what's going on with Iran right now, obviously at the instigation of the government, if not the direction of the government, they're going to be hit with sanctions again. I mean, this arrangement, I think, between the West and Iran is not really going to get off the ground. I mean, they've been developing the missiles. They've now almost they fired missiles at an American aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. And I think they're continuing to make weapons grade, or actually the plutonium was all shipped out supposedly to Russia.
Yeah.
But there are missile infractions now that I saw Obama saying that there's going to be a penalty for this. And there's going to be sanctions re-levied against institutions and people. And I don't understand what they're doing, because the population seems to be supportive of some sort of accord with the West, but yet it doesn't seem as if the leadership can get out of the way.
Well, the point is, from their point of view, the point is that they don't see why there should be American warships in the Persian Gulf.
Well, I guess that's understandable, but is that part of the agreement? No.
And that wasn't in the agreement.
Of course not.
No. But, I mean, their position from the time of the revolution and gradually in a more and more rational form has been that we have to be treated the same as everybody else. We're not a second-class country. If you can do this, we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to give in.
Well, they're going to get hit with sanctions then, again.
Well, as Russia has.
Yeah, which is not doing anybody any good, especially Putin.
But then, of course, why don't they do more about North Korea?
Well, we can talk about that, but I guess what I was following up on what you said. As we often talk about, there's this cross-border movement of ideas and people that continue to go, that transcend boundaries, that transcend nation states, and certainly transcend their governments. And I look at what's going on in Iran, and I scratch my head and I go, my goodness, I mean, are these same people who expressed all this euphoria when the foreign minister came back to Tehran after having signed the deal in Geneva? I mean, what do they think now? All right. And when I look at what's going on in China, where the government has, after decades of fooling around with 5-year economic plans, is just about at the point where they're throwing the towel in, admitting that they don't know how to control the world's second largest economy. Well, news bulletin, guess what? It's very difficult to control an economy. Nobody can really do it. All right, it's like trying to get a tiger by the tail, and they're running into the same pitfalls that the people who run the Western economies, which are larger, encounter day in and day out. And then when I look at what's going on in North Korea, supposedly with this unified state of automatons, which I don't believe for 1 minute. I believe the word has crept in there. I think people in North Korea have some understanding as to what goes on south of the 38th parallel. I just don't understand why or how leaders can remain so out of step with the people that they're supposedly governing.
The survival of North Korea really is a puzzle, because the internal economy seems to be in such a poor state, and yet they seem to be able to continue to make these technological advances.
It's very suspicious.
Yeah. And of course we don't know really what goes on between North Korea and China. And then, I mean, there's all sorts of puzzles, like all the ships with full of dead bodies washed up on the shore of Japan a week or so ago.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
No, North Korea is a puzzle. But what puzzles me more than anything else is that America is so concerned about Iran, but doesn't say very much about North Korea.
Yeah, it's fine. There was an article in Reuters earlier today, which which was unusual for them to editorialize. They basically said that Obama has given up on North Korea. Even the Chinese have given up on North Korea. Even South Korea, which is regularly threatened with being turned into a sea of fire, has given up on North Korea. It's almost like, just fine, do what you want up there. Our only response, the South Koreans' only response, is to tomorrow at noon local time, they're turning on that massive bank of
Yeah,
loudspeakers to pump in Korean rock music,
yeah.
which apparently in the evening, with the right acoustical conditions, can go about 25 miles into North Korea, and apparently drives the great leader crazy.
Uh, uh. Well, I mean, how a young man like that can suddenly fulfill the place of his old father and do more of the same sort of thing that his father was doing and get away with it is really a puzzle.
Well, let me ask you a question. All right, we often talk about this globalization trend, but we only infrequently scratch below the surface and look at the age cohorts of the people involved in the most accelerating aspects of globalization, young people. And this is where I'm wondering if a grave miscalculation has occurred, made by Putin, made by the Iranian leadership, made by the Chinese leadership, made by the Pyongyang leadership. I mean, how long do they expect this Generation X people to remain quiescent?
I think that's an interesting question, and one that's not easy to answer, because there are some parts of the world where the average age is going down, and there are other parts of the world, which are probably the most globalized parts of the world, where the average age is going up.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But those averages, though, with all due respect, I mean, those are sort of statistical fringe averages. I mean, they don't necessarily affect the collective body. I mean, if you go from 44% of the people who might be classified as Generation X cohorts to 41%, that's 3% dip is a huge statistically significant number. But in practicality, what does it actually mean in terms of the effect of those people on an institution like a government?
an institution like what?
Like a government.
Well, the government has to manage the economy,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more if the average age is rising, it becomes more and more difficult to manage the economy,
Yeah.
and that's part of the problem in China as well.
Mm-hmm. I guess I was thinking more in terms of the kind of um, political outcry those people can make could make if they were so motivated to, and I think they will make. I think they will make. It's happening in business all the time. These people who are 25 to 35 years old now, I mean, they're rattling the gates. They want in, and they have a whole different way of looking at things and a whole different way of doing things. And it's as foreign to me as maybe the way I did things was to my grandfather.
Yes. No, I think these are factors that are obviously going to change the way national societies work economically as well as politically in the coming years, and we have no idea yet what the results are going to be. And it's made that much more difficult by the fact that every country is a different stage on the same path. So, and it's being caused in one way by China, and another way in Japan, and another way in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all these pressures of increased movement of people, especially the refugees in Europe, but similar movement in other parts of the world, so that ordinary people are having to get used to having the values of their neighborhood life disturbed.
But I would submit as well that there's not that much of a difference in the knowledge base about Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Google between a Syrian 14-year-old, an American 14-year-old, a Chinese 14-year-old, a Russian 14-year-old, and well, I was going to say not a North Korean 14-year-old, but in that group, I mean, these people are all on the same level of communication understanding, I believe.
I wonder whether they all have the same sort of access.
Oh, I think they do. Everybody has mobile phones. Everybody has mobile phones, iPhones, smartphones.
Even the refugees.
Yes, they do. Yeah, because you see the stories. They call home and give notifications as to where they are as they're migrating through Europe.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be a huge accelerant to this globalization process. I think you've been talking about how we're entering the new phase, but I think the new phase over these next 5 years is going to be really, really dramatic.
And there's really very little research being done on it as well. There's very little that's actually written about the way it's changing the social scene.
Well, I would bet that in Cupertino, California, where Apple is, they have the data, the age data of their purchasers of smart devices. And I would bet that they have statisticians there who are actuarially making predictions about the future. And they probably, using that data, have a better database for these kind of projections than anybody.
Yeah, and probably Google and Facebook also have an enormous amount of information. But it's not. But this is information that they're collecting for their own commercial business purposes, rather than trying to understand the sorts of things that we're looking for, which is how the general economy and political processes are going to change.
Very interesting. Well, we may have to take a road trip to Silicon Valley.
Maybe we can find a guest we can introduce to our program.
I think that would also be a very good idea. All right. Well, thank you very much, Professor. We'll look forward to talking next week.
Good.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. No, I think that's a. I think I overlooked that until. I mean, I saw something on. I don't know, on one of the 60 Minutes or something or other, and they showed a couple teenagers from Syria, and they were interviewing the father or the uncle. The father was nowhere. I think he might have been lost on the trek, and in the background of the room were 4 or 5 young men, and they were doing what all 15-year-old men do, sitting there, head down, scrolling through their iPhones. And it occurred to me, I said, well, wait a minute. These poor guys have just jackassed 900 miles through the worst environment, through sea, ocean, mountains, whatever. And there they are with their iPhones still. And they probably would have given up their wallets, their passport, their clothes before they lost that iPhone. And it occurred to me, well, wait a minute. I mean,
how do they keep it charged?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I guess any center, any place that has a plug, a gas station, whatever, a public restroom, a place to take a shower. I don't know.
Really amazing.
Were you doing any traveling soon?
The only traveling I have to do in the near future is a trip to Los Angeles at the beginning of February.
Okay. Yeah. I have to go to London. It might be that first week of February. Be that first week. When does school start again? When do the students return?
Well, the main classes start next Wednesday, but my first class was Tuesday evening this week.
Oh, it was?
Because I'm co-teaching a course with a veterinary school.
Okay.
And their calendar is, and the schools of medicine have a different calendar from the other schools of the university.
What's the title of the course you're teaching? Co-teaching?
Global food security.
Okay. Okay.
How we're going to feed 10 billion people.
That must be very interesting to be teaching those students.
Yeah, it is very interesting. They bring their dogs to class.
Do they really? Sounds like my kind of place. We have 2 dogs.
You
So,
do?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
we do.
Uh,
Yeah, they're.
well, I've got to finish a paper on religion to present at. I've just written an abstract for a paper on religion that I've got to present in Amsterdam in the summer.
Okay.
And I'm arguing that what leads us to religion is at a different stage of the evolutionary trajectory in the brains of dogs as well.
You'll have to explain that a little more.
That that there is I've come to know a neuroscientist here who's written a book on what God does to your brain. There are some neuroscientists who think that there's something in the way our brains work that make us predisposed to a religious explanation of things.
Okay.
And it's not something that started with us.
Okay.
And it's something that is part of our evolutionary heritage. And I think that I can explain this in more detail to you, and I'll send you the paper when it's written. But you can see it at a preliminary stage in the behavior of dogs.
Really?
Because they understand symbols.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they need to know what to expect. And the great thing about religion is it explains everything for you, and it gives you a sense of order. Even though everything's changing around you,
Mm-hmm.
you can accept the changes because you know that everything's
Mm-hmm.
fixed in the overall framework.
Mm-hmm. The firmament.
Yeah.
What are you having for dinner tonight?
I don't know. I just had a big Mexican lunch, so I won't have it. But somebody just gave me a jar of caviar they brought back from Russia for me.
Oh, wow. All right.
So I've got to decide who to share the caviar with.
Well, I know one likely candidate. She's probably within 40 feet of you. So, okay. All right. Well, listen, very good. I'll get these ready, and we'll have it posted up tomorrow, and go from there.
Yeah, I wonder whether we can think of somebody who we could invite as a guest who would know about social media, and have some.
In the sense of the data they capture.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me give you some. I'll give some thought on that. I'll send you some possibilities.
Okay.
All right, because there are a couple of journalists that I've read who have talked about this off and on.
Oh.
And if we talk to one of them, then journalists always love to be interviewed because they never get interviewed. So they're always doing the interviewing. So.
Okay.
Right, you're on. All right, Professor. Take care. Good to see you again. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.